Namaste and welcome to the next segment of this journey today. We have with us a very special guest, Dr. Eric Miller. I'm sure many of you must be knowing him, but to give an introduction, he is the director of the World Storytelling Institute, which is based in Chennai and began in 2007. He is also the co-facilitator of the Indian Storytelling Network. He has completed his PhD in folklore and master's in psychology and is currently developing the field of storytelling therapy. He is the co-director of East West Center for Counseling and Training. He has hosted a 24-hour virtual storytelling conference soon after the pandemic came. He has also been hosting for 7 long years an open mic series which is called Storytelling by and for Adults on the first Monday of each month. This was happening in CCD in Chennai before the pandemic and has now adapted to happen on various online portals. He has also hosted the Chennai Storytelling Festival, and it is now in its 9th edition, which is coming up this February. It comprises of various cultural performances, seminars, and workshops. He is the pioneer in the field of video conferencing and storytelling for the past 25 years, and we could not think of a better guest for this event today. So I hope you all are decked up for this fun and insightful conversation that's going to happen in the coming minutes. So let's start the conversation by the first question. Dr. Eric, how did you start the World Storytelling Institute? What was the concept, thought process behind it? And how does it work in the preservation of art or cultural traditions? What is its scope?
Thank you. Thank you very much for your kind introduction. Well, I'm a New Yorker. I was raised in New York City, and I got involved with theater, and then I discovered there was such a thing as professional storytelling. And I especially studied with a lady named Laura Sims, who is still working in New York, and actually she visited us in Chennai for the storytelling festival in February, this past February, just before the pandemic. She came and led workshops for us. So she is one of the founders of the Global Storytelling Network, the Global Storytelling Revival, which began really in the early 70s. And so I was studying with her and working in her office, and I just felt she had such great knowledge. I said, we should really start an institute. And she said, oh yes, sure. And that was the end of it. That was in the 1970s. 40 years ago? 40 years ago. But what happened was 30 years later, in 2007, after I'd moved to Chennai, I felt that actually the time had come to found the Storytelling Institute, and I found the name World Storytelling Institute was available. So myself and two others began the World Storytelling Institute here, and its mission is just to learn about traditional forms of storytelling, modernize them, make them useful for modern use. And so we have training in styles of storytelling, performance, discussion, all to document and develop this human heritage of communication through storytelling, both the ways of speaking in various languages and of course the content of stories. Cultures put their moral ideals in their big stories. So of course we can learn a lot about a culture from its stories.
Right. Indeed. And I think in this current era, it is a very contextual and a much needed thing. We're standing at a pedestal where initiatives and organizations like this are, going to save whatever is left of our culture. Going next, can you give me an insight on an experience of you working around the endangered oral traditions of Indian communities?
Yes, well, I really worked with the Tamil culture. I'm a student of Tamil culture, even though Kontam Tamil Teriyam. And the leading traditional story in Tamil Nadu is the story of a lady named Kannagi. And the story is called the Epic of the Ankle Bracelet, or the Epic of the Anklet. In Tamil, it's called Silapadigaram. So when I read this story in English translation, as a college student, I felt so drawn to it. The main character, she protests to the king of Madurai because the king thought her husband was a thief and the king put her husband to death. But her husband had been wrongfully accused. He was not a thief. So she goes to the court and she proves to the king that the king was wrong, and he apologizes. So I really love that story. So that's one story. But then I did my field work for my PhD with a tribal people in the mountains in southern Tamil Nadu, and they have another story about a woman who tries to help her husband. I don't know, should I go into the details of these stories now, or?
You can actually, I think since you've started, it has, caught my attention as well. So you can just tell the story, and I'm excited to hear what happens next.
Okay, well, in the Epic of the Ankle Bracelet, after her husband is put to death, the husband's body is just thrown in the street. His head was cut off, and his head and his body was in the street. And she came and she wept, of course. And in her delirium, she tried to put the head back on the body, hoping he would come back to life. But of course, it was not to be. So that's when she went to the king and she proved to the king that the king had made a mistake. And it goes on from there. But the tribal story that I studied, which I only learned years later, is about 7 brothers. And the 6 older brothers invite the younger brother to go hunting for wild pigs in the forest. So the younger brother says, okay, and they all go off into the forest. But when they're deep in the forest, the 6 older brothers turn on their younger brother and stab him with their spears, and they kill him. The story doesn't tell us why, but they kill him. And so the younger brother had 2 dogs. And these 2 dogs went running back to the younger brother's wife. And they said, they communicated to the wife to come to her husband's. And so the dogs brought her to her husband's body. And she, just like Kannagi in that other story, knelt down and started weeping. In Tamil Nadu, it's called opari, lamenting, mourning. But it's very, emotional. So in this story, this tribal story, a snake and a mongoose are nearby. Now, usually a snake and a mongoose are fighting. They're natural enemies.
Yeah.
But in this case, they were just playing and they heard the lady crying. So they came and saw, and the snake said, don't worry, madam, we will get the medicine. So the snake and the mongoose went off and they got a certain flower from a certain mountain and brought it back, and it was crushed and it was put on the younger brother's body, and he came back to life. And so the young man and his wife and the 2 dogs went back to the village. They told the Panchayat leaders what had happened, and the 6 older brothers were exiled. They had to leave the village. So I found that story so interesting and beautiful and hopeful, optimistic, that the power of nature through the animals and the plant was actually able to bring the young man back to life, in contrast to Kannagi, who, even though she loved her husband just as much, she did not have the power of nature to actually bring him back to life.
Yeah, I think that's a really beautiful analogy that you have kind of established, telling us these 2 different stories, and it really makes us think as well. So I think, and that is the beauty of these ancient stories. They kind of just persist within our communities and somehow make it the identity of a particular sect of people as well.
The tribal people identify, tremendously with the forest.
Yeah.
as a place of power, because they feel divine elements are throughout the forest. And of course, the forest is also a place of danger.
Right. Right.
But if the divine is with you, if Mother Nature is with you, you are safe in the forest.
Yeah.
Look at Shakuntala. You know the
Yeah.
story? She
Yeah.
goes with her baby son off into the forest. Usually, somebody would be destroyed in the forest from the wild beasts. But
Hmm.
she and her son are somehow protected, and even the young boy is playing with the tiger when his father finds him.
Right. That's true. And in fact, I think all these stories also bring to light how, like, they draw a stark comparison between how today's generation is and how these stories of the past were, and how there is this constant sense of relatability which still exists in communities despite so much of modernization that is coming in. So it also, brings into light the urgency of preserving all these oral traditions through each
The,
story.
the Kani people feel that all nature is alive with the divine. For example, one day my Kani friends, took me to a place in the forest where there were two huge stones, two boulders next to each other. And they said, oh yes, this is the place where the wicked man was crushed. And I said, what? And they said, yes, and Udumbu is a big lizard, which
Hmm.
in ancient days was hunted.
Right.
Uh, so a wicked man, there's nothing wrong with hunting in Udumbu in those days if it was done respectfully. But for some reason, this man had been behaving wickedly. So the Udumbu went between the two boulders, and when the man followed him, the boulders came together and crushed him.
Hmm.
So that means that somehow the divine power of justice was in those boulders.
Yeah, 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 that's true. But like, straying away from the conversation a little, like, you have been working with the communities for so long. Do you, sometimes question, or do you sometimes believe in its holistic nature, the stories that are coming by, or do you think they are myths, and or like, what is the level of you believing in them as much as the communities do?
Well, I take it on a level of poetry
Hmm.
and poetic justice. So in the world of storytelling, it is not so much a question of did this actually happen,
Right,
but the question of what models of thinking and feeling of behavior does the story present to us?
right,
We
right,
are not historians. We
right.
are more
Poets.
anthropologists and psychologists.
Right.
So but the thing is, you see, until the last couple generations, the forest was a place of great power and wealth.
Hmm.
All of
Hmm.
the things to eat and drink and building materials came from the forest.
Right.
So it had a great place of power in people's lives.
Yeah.
Now, so much comes from outside, from the cities. Uh, Money and authority comes from the government, major religions, businesses. So people are naturally abandoning their traditional cultures because it doesn't have the same power. People need
Right.
to, at least in part, make a living from a traditional culture and a traditional language for them to keep it up.
Exactly. That's a very valid point that was brought ahead, Dr. Eric, that people need to be able to capitalize, or, have some sort of an economic generation happening to be able to preserve that. That's
And
actually the harsh truth.
that's why many scholars and entrepreneurs develop partnerships with
Hmm.
traditional peoples to
Hmm.
develop ecotourism
Hmm.
so that outsiders can come and visit and learn about the traditional culture.
Right.
And in that way, the local people can also make some money from it. It has to be
Yeah.
done carefully so the
Hmm.
nature is not destroyed. It has to be done together with the local district forest officer
Hmm.
for them to decide who can come and where and how it should be done. And now after this once this pandemic has come, the regulations are going to change also.
Yeah,
But I
yeah,
very much believe in helping people put themselves on the map if they want
right.
to, through using social media, because these people now, they consume electronic communication. They, even though they're tribal people, they live beside a forest, they have electricity, they have
Yeah,
television, they have FM radio. So they are
yes,
consuming electronic images. Why not also enable them or help facilitate them producing images and
yeah,
recordings of themselves?
agreed, agreed.
See, our senior professors in folklore were against that. Many of them. They said
Yeah,
if you help the tribal people use electronic technology, you will be ruining their culture. You see, because
yeah,
they wanted them to stay traditional.
yeah.
But now it's not like that. Even tribal people anywhere, they have their mobile telephones.
I
Uh,
agree, I agree.
so
It's a very thin line though. It's a very thin line in between.
in what sense? A thin line between.
A thin line between, even tribals getting to learn the modern technology, but not forgetting what they have.
Yes.
That's
Well, I
the thin
think we
line.
can count on, you see, in every tribal community, there are some young people
Hmm.
who have one foot in the traditional tribe and one foot in the outside world.
Yeah.
And those are the young people who can help facilitate their parents and grandparents to communicate with the outside world
Yeah. Yeah. That's true.
if they want to.
If they want to. Right. So going ahead with the conversation, since I believe you're residing in Chennai right now, what are the few things which you think represent the culture of the tribals or the communities in that area in terms of traditional folklore, myths, and stories surrounding it?
Well, the tribal people I work with, who are called the Kani people, the Kanikaran people, and they are based in far southern Tamil Nadu. About 20,000 of them are on the Tamil side, and 20,000 are on the Kerala side, and they speak a mix of Tamil and Malayalam. They don't have hardly any cultural representation in Chennai. But the story of that lady who protested against the king, the epic of the ankle bracelet, that story is still known here in Chennai. It's taught in schools as a lesson that the justice will punish the wicked.
Right.
And there's a famous statue of Kanagi on Marina Beach, which is
Oh,
reminds you every time you pass the beach, she's standing like this, accusing the king, you murdered my husband, and she's holding one of her anklets. It's a long story. He
right,
uses an anklet to prove that her husband was innocent, but she's
right.
there pointing, saying, you did it. So
Yeah,
I believe it's still in the air. Every politician, every police person knows
yeah,
that if you punish the wrong person, um, bad things will happen. Because in the
yeah,
story, you see, when the king realizes that he made a mistake, um, uh, he punishes himself. He dies basically. He stops breathing. He stops his blood pressure. He lays down and dies. He died of a broken heart that he had abused justice. And then Carnegie was still angry at the people of the city, and she walked around the city 3 times and requested the god of fire to cleanse the city by burning it. But good people and animals should escape. And good people walked with her to the mountains as the city was burning, and she started a new village in those western mountains. So everybody knows that if you make a mistake, like that king made a mistake, it could lead to destruction, utter
mm,
destruction. So I think
mm,
that still has an impact on people
yeah.
in Tamil Nadu, although it's not a very visible contact, but I think it's in people's minds.
Yeah, even as you're saying it, I'm getting goosebumps. I mean, it is definitely creating some sort of an impact, and it's a beautiful thing, as you said, that there is a statue which is there, which is a constant reminder. And yeah, that's a very beautiful thing to still have in the city. Going ahead, do you think, uh, like with the work that you have done so far, do you think there is a need to preserve the undocumented oral traditions? And if so, then what do you think is the way ahead in this journey, in this common aim that we have?
Well, as mentioned, and I know you're involved with this work too, of
Yeah.
facilitating people to visit, if it's possible, or by electronically also now by video conference, to help support the traditional peoples and their cultures by enabling them to present their culture to the outside world. And it's essential that members of the community are involved in the decisions, the financial decisions, all of the decisions that go into putting together a tourist attraction. It should not just be done by the outside people. It should not just be done by the
Exactly.
government
Right.
or by entrepreneurs. It should be done in partnership. So near the Kani people, the big town down there is Pechiparai. And near Pechiparai now, there is a beautiful facility that has been created, possibly in part due to my influence 10 years ago, but a beautiful building and bungalows about with lots of documentation of the Kani people. This has been put up by the tourism department.
Hmm.
Uh,
Right.
but I'm not sure if it's being used. I'm not sure if there's mixed feelings in the forest
Yeah.
department.
Yeah.
Some forest department people want to promote tribal cultures,
Hmm.
and some forest department people feel that for the good of the forest, tribal people should be removed from the forest.
Yeah.
But I am of the belief, as many forest officers are, that the tribal people often help protect the forest.
True.
They alert the officials if something wrong is going on.
Hmm.
And, basically there's a mutually supportive situation between traditional language and culture and the biological environment.
Right. Right.
The language, the culture, and the
Hmm.
animals and the plants and other elements of the forest. If you take a people out of the forest, they will lose their knowledge of the forest and they will lose their language. So if
Exactly.
traditional knowledge is important, as government officials are always saying, traditional knowledge is so important, then the government needs to help traditional people stay where they are so they
Hmm.
don't lose their language and knowledge.
That's actually true.
So
Also, it's
we're hoping
very
for government support, but
yeah.
also hoping within government limits to facilitate education and entertainment
Hmm.
and tourism, even virtual tourism.
Yeah.
Because, see, even in the village that I did my field work, a number of the teenagers spoke English totally fluently. They had been to a
Right.
Catholic school and, and they were well aware of Collywood, Bollywood, and Hollywood. So
Right.
those young people can help facilitate this public education and entertainment process about what is life in the forest like. And as
Right.
I say, it has to be done in a way that is safe and does not damage the forest, and that
Hmm.
government is also satisfied. And
That's
in fact,
actually
the government of Tamil Nadu, the forest department, has ecological tourism projects that they facilitate, that they help run.
yeah. In fact, those are very important points that you're actually bringing out. Nowadays tourism has gotten a certain negative connotation to it. Which just implies that it's somebody coming from the outside and disrupting the current culture. But if it is in a controlled fashion, if it's in a self-sufficed ecosystem fashion, then it can actually do wonders and in itself act as a cycle of preservation within the community without having an external dependence. So that's actually a great point that you have put ahead. With that, I think we come to the end of this conversation. There are a lot of students who are watching. There are a lot of people who are interested in storytelling, who are watching, people from all the age groups, is there anything that you would want to say, especially to the younger generation who's watching here? Any few words for them?
Well, storytelling is not dying out, especially with now video conferencing. We can even say there's a rebirth of the oral tradition, because to speak well in a video conference is important, both for personal life and professional life. So I just encourage everyone to do their best to learn from traditional ways of speaking, and modify those traditional ways to help improve your own speaking. And if you ever want to join this once a month storytelling session online, just Google World Storytelling Institute, and you'll find it.
Yep. I think that's that. Thank you very much for having this conversation with us. The Not on Map team and me are very privileged, I must say, to have these conversations. We have been looking at your work and getting your newsletters very frequently. We are always inspired and awed by the things that are happening in Chennai and worldwide with you. I hope all the viewers got it down. He is Dr. Eric Miller once again for all of you. Please reach out to him and do follow his work.
And I want to congratulate you for the documenting the undocumented and the not on map project. I'm really so impressed that you and your team are working on this and gathering scholars and community resource people from all over the country. And I really look forward to seeing how you develop it.
Yes. Thank you so much for your support. All the people and communities coming together like this are like little drops in the ocean. Hopefully one day we will be able to make this a larger than life movement and a self-sufficed one. So, all right. Thank you so much for this conversation. Have a great day ahead, Dr. Eric. Bye-bye.
Thank you.